Hey y'all, welcome back to the studio. We are going to make this really sweet cappuccino mug. We do have three sizes of this. This is going to be the large cappuccino mug that we'll be making today. So I've got my large cappuccino mug jig, and then I've got the optional cutter. I've already gone ahead and cut out the bottom. I like to let that set up for a while I'm constructing the body of this mug. You don't have to buy the cutter with it, but our cutter is fit for it. You can also download free templates on our website under our extras tab. So again, on this template, you'll need to do a couple and cut and tape them together. I've done some overbending on my clay using this small rolling pin. And because of the shape, I had to curl it in from both sides. But really what I want is as I unfurl it, you'll see those edges at the seam will be curled in. What I'm trying to do is get ahead of the puckering at the seam, where the seam can sometimes go to a V or pull your shape out of round. So we're just trying to take some steps to minimize that. I'm going to use cornstarch as my release agent today. This is my favorite. It's an organic material. It burns off cleanly in the kiln. I don't use underglaze, so I don't have to worry about taking this off. If you are using underglaze or waxing your pot for any kind of inlay or anything, you'll want to make sure you get all of this off. But I don't have to do that step. I just burn it off in the kiln. And I keep all my extras. I put it in a little pot off to the side. So you can see my clay here is not very soft. This is clay that has been sitting for a while, and that's okay. I'm going to still use it. The jig will help me to keep the shape, and it is soft enough to still shape around. We're going to start with the cappuccino jig upside down because we like to build from the widest part, the base, up. So I'm going to go ahead and start using my banding wheel right away, and I will start shaping by hand. The warmth of your hand, hopefully your clay is just a touch more wet than mine is here, but the warmth of your hand should allow you to start molding that clay. What we're looking for is the clay to fit snugly around the rim, which is now face down. And we are going to do a couple things to shape this. I am going to use the paddle, and I'm not going to start with my seam buttoned up. I'm going to leave my seam loose. Because of the slope of this jig, it's just easier to allow the clay to move freely all the way in front. So I'm taking a large clay paddle here, and I'm just working from the natural curve all the way up. I've put in my texture through the rolling, through my slab roller. So my texture is really deep in on both sides. So paddling at this point for myself isn't going to affect my texture. But if you are looking to add texture by hand, you may want to do it after this process because paddling can kind of get rid of your texture. So I have created a little bit more overlap there. I'm going to come in and just start doing some cuts here. With my jigs, you'll have to do a few cuts because I like to take off little by little, kind of inch it together. So I'm just going to do a beveled cut so that fits nicely into itself. And I'm going to cut on both sides while I'm shaping this. I just use a pencil grip for this. You just want a cut that's going to match on both so it sits nice and flush. With the structure of this jig, I'm able to actually pick up my project and see how I'm lining up on the bottom and on the sides, which is really great. It just kind of gives you an extra handle on it. Now I'm going to button up the seam just halfway up. Because we've done most of our preliminary shaping at the bottom, I do want to tack this in so that the only clay that will start to overlap will be the clay at the top. You'll see here in a second. So I'm just going to score both sides, and I apply my vinegar slip to the outside. Sorry, my arm's in the way here. I like to apply the vinegar slip to the outside piece of clay. You really don't want to get any of your slip in between the jig and the clay. That just kind of creates a suction, a sticky situation, and it'll make it harder to remove. So I'm going to go in and squeeze my seam. See how it's fitting in right nicely there. Pick it up. I like to squeeze it with the palm of my hand to give it nice, good pressure and to really bring that seam together. Because of the pattern in my clay, it really does blend in nicely. So now I'm going to just do a couple revolutions around, taking the warmth of my hands. The bottom is secure, but that top piece by the seam is still free. So as I'm applying pressure, it's still able to move. So as my clay starts to pucker at the top, you can see kind of those wavy bits. I'm going to take off just a little bit. It can look deceiving because it looks like we have a ton of extra clay, but as we push it in on the curve, you can lose some height and you can kind of cut too much. So I don't do my final cut until I can feel that the shape is all the way in there and that all my clay is making good contact. This is a 1.5-inch speedball brayer I like to use. And then again, the warmth in my hands, really making sure I'm compressing. This part can, I think this part's a lot of fun, but it can take a little bit. You really want to feel the jig through the clay. And it's kind of hard to explain unless you've experienced it, but you can truly feel when it's making contact. So after I feel like I have good contact all the way around, I'm going to fasten up the rest of my seam just by cutting off any extra that has overlapped in that shaping process. I will score and then slip, and then we'll go through and we'll refine that seam, and I will come through and make sure that my top is nice and level. So I sometimes take my scoring down into my previous spot that I attached it, just to make sure that there's not a weak point there. So I'm going to squeeze it through. If I get any slip on my fingers, I wipe it off on my apron or a towel. Any kind of moisture on your fingers will leave fingerprints and it will lift your texture. You really want to work with dry, clean hands. So now that I've got the seam together on that, I'm going to do some more revolutions, making sure I'm really compressing the seam from the outside. And I want to make sure that you can see here that I have enough clay to come over the top so that we can make a really nice level cut. Had I cut off more during the shaping process, I wouldn't have enough to attach a foot on a level surface. So warmth in my hands, just really working that clay in. It's such a beautiful shape. It's a very simple shape, really elegant. And then I'm going to use the top of the jig at an angle with my knife. I'm creating an angled cut first. And the reason for that is I need to see if my clay is making contact. You can see a couple points where it's still not completely against. So I'm going to go around again and just making sure I'm smushing the clay so it's making really nice contact with it. After I've got that seam or that those cracks kind of closed there, those gaps closed, then I will come through with my knife and I will do a flat cut. We want as much surface area as we can so that we can get our foot on nice and level. This gives you a really level foot because you're level with the jig. So I really like to do it that way. And then I score sometimes. It kind of depends on the project. But for this project, I do like to score while it's still on the jig. It's just easy to do at this point. I will score again, but I do like to lay in that preliminary score lines now. So we are going to release the clay from the jig. It will help us in the removal process. And now we've got our cappuccino mug is almost done. It's so beautiful. So I'm going to come on, flip it on to the right side up, and then I'm going to make sure that my seam is looking good. That's what you see me doing there. I'm touching that up. And I want to make sure that the top is also level. And I will come through with the brayer to make a nice drinking lip as well. So I've been doing this. Not only does it compress, but it also rounds the drinking lip a little bit more. So it's not so squared off, which is my preference. But honestly, you can do, finish your lip however you see fit. And then I don't do a ton of cleanup, but I do want to make sure I'm not leaving any burrs or anything like that at this point. And then I'm going to go through and level off the top because what we did on the bottom, we want to do on the top just to make sure that that is nice and level. And we will do some more to the drinking lip just in a little bit after we've got the jig removed. So now it's time for removal. What we're going to do is do a slight twisting motion. And then you're going to be really patient here. Using your opposite hand to support your form, you can feel when the jig pops. After the jig pops up, I'm going to just seat it in there and kind of keep that in there for structure. If you are having issues removing your jig, it's likely that your clay was too wet, you didn't use enough cornstarch, or your jig was dirty to begin with. You want to make sure you're starting with a nice, clean jig. So there's the inside of our cappuccino form. I'm going to work on the seam in there. Just kind of touch that up. I like to close that seam. We've really compressed it from the outside, but you do want to make sure that the inside is compressed and closed and looks nice. We want it to look as good on the inside as it does on the outside. And the glaze there, you will take a little bit of your texture up if you have double-sided texture, but honestly, the glaze pulls right in and it doesn't take away from, too much away from the design element. So for this project, you will need our XL rim cone. Honestly, the XXL, the 2XL would work out as well. You'll see that our XL goes almost up completely to the ridge. You don't have to add cornstarch, but I wiped it off and I just wanted to make sure I wasn't leaving any moisture. So here our XL is, I mean, it's almost perfect for this mug, but if you do have the size up from there, that would also work. So I put my rim cone in there while I attach the bottom. I will slide my banding wheel over, make sure I have a clean work surface, and we're going to baker's flip. That can be kind of scary, but it's okay. If you flip your cone out of there, just kind of track it down and reseat it. So now we've got a tiny banding wheel with our cone. I will use our regular rim cone to make sure that my bottom is true. I did squeeze it a little hard. When the jig releases, sometimes you can put pressure on the form and it can cave in a little bit. So I just take the whatever size rim cone I need to make sure that bottom part is nice and round. It'll just make attaching the foot easier. So here we have the bottom that I already cut out. This, for my clay, because I do a second roll through with the texture, my clay ends up being smaller than a 1/4 inch, thinner than a 1/4 inch. We assume that you are using the standard 1/4 inch slab to build with. So our cutters are formulated for a 1/4 inch slab. So you'll see my bottom on here looks a little bit larger, but that's because my clay is thinner than the standard. So it's not a big deal. I just use the standard cutter and then I take off extra. So if you are wanting to work thinner with your clay slabs, you can totally still do that. You just have to make minor adjustments. So I'm going to visually set this on. I did a dry fit first, and then I'm going to just spin it around and make sure that I'm as even as possible. And then I'm going to lightly tack it down with my fingers. I don't commit 100% because I'm going to come in here and fake my foot. I will use our small anvil. And what I do with this is I pop in the foot here at the bottom. So I'll find the center and I'll just roll it in. And it gives me a little bit of an elevated foot, kind of like you would trim it on the potter's wheel. And that gives it just a little bit of lift, a little bit of elevation, and a little bit of a design, a nice design there. And we want those surprises when people lift up your work and they kind of, or if, they're drinking out of the cup and the person across from them gets to see, they get a fun little surprise at the bottom. So I use texture inside, outside, and on the bottom. You don't have to do that if you want to keep your bottoms bare. That's okay. That's your design. Those are your design choices, and that's what makes it fun. So I just came around and shaved off a little bit of that extra I was talking about, and we are going to flip it back onto the banding wheel, and then I will give it some light pressure on the downward pressure there and make sure that we're nice and seated in. Hey, we're almost done. So I've got my mini shark fin foot tool here, and this is my favorite tool to use to clean up the bottom. I've got the banding bat on the wheel. It helps keep my wooden insert still. Sometimes I add some water to kind of stick my clay, and sometimes I just go for it. So I'm using the curved part of the mini shark fin foot tool, and what I'm doing is I'm picking up all that extra clay. Let me see if I can get you in here closer so you can kind of see what I'm doing here. So I'm using the curved part, and the curved part tilted at an angle will shave off that extra lump, that extra kind of ribbon of clay towards the top of my foot. When you finish the bottom of your vessel, it's really up to you what you want to do for design choice. I will end up carving and fluting into this bottom. So I like to lay a nice smooth band all the way around, and it gives me a nice clean canvas to do my carving in. If you wanted it to leave the foot a little bit more extended and add some frill to that, pinch it up, just make a design element out of that extra clay down there. That's a great idea too. I also do this because I want to create a shadow line when my mug hits the table. When it's set down, having that little bit of an undercut there gives it a shadow line, and it elevates the pot off of the surface. So it just makes it look a little lighter and gives a nice look when it's setting down. So there's an example of the fluting I'm going to do. So I can get kind of fussy at this point because I do want to make sure I'm setting myself up. But if you wanted to stop there, that would be a perfectly finished bottom there. We would just need to sponge it and make sure that we get all those schnibbies up from the trimming process down there. I always recommend trimming the bottom at least a little bit. It does take off some weight. So if you are feeling like maybe your pot is on the heavier side, the bottom is definitely where you can lose some weight for that. So I'm just checking right now to make sure that my pot is still in the round. We fight the good fight with this. You know, our pots will never be perfect, but we do try to do our best to make sure it's as round and as formed as well as we can on our way through the making process. So into the overhead shot, I want to show you how to address the seam on the inside. So we've already done our vertical seam, but now we need to take care of the seam from where we attach the bottom on. So I take a rubber color shaper tool, and I go and I just pick a direction and make sure that I am compressing the seam. I'm picking up any extra slip that may have splooged out from down there, making sure that I am picking up any burrs that I'm lifting up with that guy. We want that nice and smooth. And then I take my Vinegar Studio brush and I just go ahead and smooth that and touch up the edges there. When this is leather hard, I will double check that as well. And then I have a chance here to take a peek at the rim. And as you can see, we are nice and even all the way around, nice and round. It's a really beautiful shape. It's going to hold a really lovely cappuccino. I wanted to show you an example of how to put a handle on this. So I'm going to cut through it to a clip. This is actually another video that I filmed, but I want to show you how a way that you can add handles. I have examples of hand building handles where you just roll out, use a slab to make the handle, but I wanted to give you an example if you wanted to pull the handle off of your mug. So I just start with a lug of clay, and honestly, I just keep slamming it down until I get the length and the width that I like. I do also really like extruding handles as well, and that kind of minimizes this step. So that looks pretty good. I've got the length and the width that I like. So I'm going to just smush down the top to give it kind of this wide area, a wide surface area to attach, and then that'll also give me plenty of clay to blend in. So I will slip and score here, and I'll slow the video down back to normal for you so you can see the attachment point. Sorry for the camera work. I'm making and doing the camera at the same time. There we go. So I'm going to just score the top part where I'm going to attach. And when I attach my handles, I just use water. And this minimizes the moisture that I'm introducing between the clay. So I just dip the top in enough to get that wet. And then I will slide it back and forth and wiggle it onto the pot until I feel it grab. So if it's really sliding around a ton, you'll want to just be patient with that and keep wiggling until the clay starts to grab onto itself. I keep my rim cone in here for a portion as I'm putting pressure on it because this is a relatively wet pot. If this was more leather hard, I wouldn't be so nervous, but I'm kind of for demonstration's sake here, I'm just trying to get in through the process. So I will wet my finger a little bit and I will start to blend. Again, you will lose a little bit of texture around your handle when you're pulling it off this way, but I don't think that's a big deal. I think in the whole scheme of things, I don't think that people are really going to feel too badly about losing a little bit of texture by where that handle, they probably honestly wouldn't even notice. So I am going to make sure the underside is attached, and I'm going to wet my hand and I'm going to wet the handle here. This is kind of tough to do on video, so hopefully you can get the gist of it. And what you want to do is apply really even slick pressure. I keep my hand nice and wet, and then I like to put a nice little groove down the middle of my handle. Sorry, you guys, for the camera work. I wish it was a better. This is not a handle tutorial, but you can check out if you are looking for a great pulling handle tutorial. Please head over to Florian Gadsby's YouTube page. He is the person that you want to learn from when it comes to pulling handles. I still don't make my handles as thin as he does, but he did teach me a ton. The benefits of pulling off the mug, the handle off the mug, is you get a really strong attachment and it's really fast to do. And then you get a more seamless transition from the body of the mug to the handle. Okay, I'm happy with where this handle is as far as length and the thickness of it. So I am going to lift it, of course, out of frame for you. And I'm just, right now, I'm just wrapping it over my fingers and making sure that I have a nice curve to that. And you want to make sure that your handle kind of matches the form that you're doing as well. So on my flatter side mugs, anything with a straight side, I do end up doing more of a squared off handle, but for the cappuccino mug, I really do like that sweetheart shape for this one. And I will do a shorter version of this wider, so it's a 2-finger grip as well. So I'm going to blend into the bottom and just get rid of anything extra down there. I don't score the bottom of my handles, I just score the top. And then with the pressure of my finger, I will push that bottom in, and I will come along with a paintbrush, a little bit of vinegar to make sure that it's attached really nicely. So now I'm just doing some fine tuning, but this is a quick example of how you could pull a handle off of a hand-built mug as an option. Brings us back to the mug that we were building together. I hope that you enjoyed this project. It really is so quick and easy. After I've got my texture rolled in, this project only takes me about 15 to 20 minutes to put together. There's the example with the 2-finger like I was telling you, and this is our large cappuccino mug project using our large cappuccino mug jig and our XL rim cone and the optional cutter that you can find under the combo under our new cappuccino jigs for you. I would love to hear if you tried this project out, and I would love to see your work. Thanks for coming by, you guys, and we'll see you again soon. Take care.